Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you with us on this for this major announcement. I am going to turn things over now to our Just Leadership USA President and CEO, Deanna Hoskins, who will be taking us through this announcement. Deanna.
You guys, thank you, Stephen. And just for context, if you have questions during this presentation, please drop them in the Q&A, and we will definitely follow up with a Q&A section after this. We definitely want any questions you guys have or any things you think we haven't thought about. So again, thank you for joining us for this announcement. Why are we here today is mostly the question everyone is talking or thinking. What we realized at Just Leadership through our strategic planning, our process, is that we are a national organization, and our goal is to create a national movement to build local power while we're focusing on dismantling oppressive systems. Those systems that are entrenched with policies that allow the discriminatory things to occur in our community, whether it's through housing, whether it's through employment or access to medical and substance abuse treatment. One of the things that we realize is that in this country, every human being has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Constitution clearly states we are the people. Who are the people? We're part of those people. But unfortunately, for us who have had contact with the criminal justice system, our actually access to that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness becomes limited. It becomes limited based on the policies. Can you switch to the next slide? Based on the policies that have been instituted to say people with criminal convictions have limited access. What we've discovered is that at the federal level, the policies give discretion to localities. So your locality may have adopted policies that says people with certain crimes can't have access. People who have interacted in a certain way may not have access to a college education or training programs. So one of the things that we have actually said, if we're going to be a national organization, and the U.S. Declaration of Independence guarantees that rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the JCC that we're actually announcing today strives to improve the lives of people with lived experience, to increase that access to liberty and full participation in the democratic process. What does that look like? One of the things we've realized is that we have to build our own table. So therefore, we are kicking off what is called the JustUS Coordinating Council on a federal level to give individuals who are business system impacted the consistent presence in a federal level, that we are no longer being co-opted for our voices. We are no longer being reactive to legislation that's being pushed. We are actually leading the table around our issues that impact us and our communities and our daily lives. But how did we get here? Why the JCC? Typically, we as advocates, social justice movement builders, we've either played checkers or chess. Checkers is our grassroots game that moves quick, keeps things moving locally. Chess is the long game of legislation that may take a year or two on a federal level to pass. We've discovered a middle ground. We discovered a middle ground of backgammon. That middle ground is senior staff within federal government, what I call the WEB. And what I mean by WEB, they're the individuals that determine we be here when you be gone. No matter who's in the White House, they're still going to be senior staff. They're going to still be the people who educate the political appointees when they come in. I'll give you a prime example of this. Most of us were moving on legislation. Nobody paid attention that Pell restoration occurred under the last administration. Why did it get the hype that it should have gotten? Because the principal person appointed by the president was actually tearing down the Department of Education, but Pell passed because senior staff at the Department of Education kept their foot on the gas pedal in partnership with advocates. When senior staff in federal government have an initiative or there's agenda items, they bring that to the top front of that booklet, they give their new principle on organizations. So you may be asking, what is the JCC? What is this JustUS Coordinating Council that we're looking at building? We are a group of individuals, incarcerated individuals, who are determined to build our own table. We are actually system impacted individuals from across 50 states who are committed to having a consistent, vigilant presence, no matter who's in the White House, who's in the State House, the courthouse, or City Hall across this country. Nobody asks, or the NAACP, AARP, NAN, Poor People's Campaign, nobody cares who's in the White House. Why? Because their issues are still their issues and they must be addressed. They don't play the political game. They play the community game of, we are moving for our people. So who is the JCC? The JustUS Coordinating Council, as I said, is a national network of system impacted individuals across all 50 states, including DC, that informs decision-making at the federal, state, and local level. You guys are already doing this at your local and state level. We have to create our presence on a federal level. The JCC is the connective tissue that demands change through creating a united purpose for a united voice to establish united power. So what is the mission of the JCC? The mission of the JCC is to enhance quality of life for justice impacted individuals by dismantling the systemic oppressions, those systems that uphold systemic oppression and marginalization rooted in racial inequities and collateral consequences in order to restore human dignity. What do I mean by that? The fact that there is a policy within HUD that has never defined homelessness, localities are using prisons and jail as housing so people do not qualify for access to emergency housing funds that come through HUD. What are other policies? Workforce Investment Act does not identify directly impacted people. It identifies dislocated worker. Therefore, when those federal funds hit your state and your local workforce board, they are determining, do we benefit from having access to those programs and those training programs in our communities? So one of the things we realize is we got to control our own narrative. We know Shirley Chisholm has said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. What the JCC has said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, we'll just build our own. We released this report yesterday. It's an unprecedented report. It has made all the media. It is the first time directly impacted people convene the table with Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, law enforcement, victim services, public defenders, probation, parole, National Association of Mayors, governors, county officials, to say, we have to look at how we advance racial equity in the criminal justice system because certain populations are tired of being the target. This was released in partnership with White House individuals and other people participating that build a consensus on what states and localities can do and what those certain populations can do. One of the current themes through this report, we realize arrest starts in the community, re-entry starts in the community. We cannot continue to make decisions in the criminal justice system that is not inclusive of the community and the stakeholders most impacted by the criminal justice system. Building the table around economic justice is our report coming out, and I will turn it over to my co-presenter at this time.
Thank you, Deanna, and welcome everyone. So as Deanna mentioned, this report highlights a multitude of issues that we at the JustUS Coordinating Council have identified and presented in a report. To give you a real brief snapshot of some of the things that are in this report and some of the things that we highlight is in total approximately $200 million was appropriated by Congress for employment and training resources, specifically for folks returning from incarceration in FY22. But in comparison, the system of mass incarceration costs the government and families of justice involved individuals at least $182 billion every year. So those impacted by the criminal legal system, both those incarcerated and those convicted, but yet not incarcerated, experience an overall aggregate of $372 billion in lost wages. So it is estimated that this will cost the U.S. economy between $1 and $1.5 trillion between 2019 and 2028. So this report, essentially, our ask is $10 billion of new funding that has been identified by the administration and based on several different levers in federal government. So this will not only fund things such as RIO, the First Step Act, Second Chance Act, WIOA, and other existing programs, but really create new pathways to economic mobility for justice-impacted individuals and their communities. And with that, I will pass it back over to Deanna.
Thank you. So you may be saying, what does all that mean? What is that all really saying? Well, currently what it's saying is that the federal government only invests roughly around, I think he said 200 million into reentry services of people returning from incarceration. Why is that significant? Because we spend 182 billion on mass incarceration. So if you're continuing to underinvest in us, if you're continuing to underinvest in our communities, we're going to continue to be at a deficit in our re-engagement, our reinvestment to become productive members in society. But a reason economic mobility was important, and I just want to share this for you. I use this limited access. There's this parable that says, if you give a person a fish, you feed them for the day. But if you teach them to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. But there's a part where fish forgetting. You got to have access to the water to even be able to fish. So when you look at federal funding, we've typically looked at Department of Justice, Department of Labor. We haven't looked at those federal funds that come out of the federal government that roll down to our community, where I call the rubber hits the road, that we have access to programs and different things of that nature. We are currently acting as if and operating with the picture on the left. We are doing nothing but enjoying the water slide. While the picture on the right, we're missing the whole amusement part. Department of Transportation puts out more money around roads, bridges, sewers than any other federal department. There's a Section 3 clause within the federal government that says if your locality receives federal funding, 35% of your workforce got to be from the communities most marginalized in that area. Our localities have not been pushing this. This money has been coming out, and I'm sure you've seen in your areas when major construction is going on, you see license plates from out of town, license plates from neighboring states who go home on the weekend and use that economic mobility in their communities while keep defecating and just are tearing up our communities, not reaping any of those benefits to the people who are actually going to walk those streets that were built, across those bridges that are being built. We have not participated in that. So we're moving towards this. We're launching the last week of Reentry Week, the last week of Second Chance Month, April 28th through 30th. And Friday, we're having what's called a hackathon with our federal partners. We will have HUD in the room, DOL, Consumer Finances, the SBA, FCC around telephone calls. And we will be convening conversations with directly impacted people so they can get the information directly, but also that they can exchange information of what's in their backgammon chest that they can move administratively that doesn't require legislation, or is that a local rule that your locality has issued, and we can get the federal government to do what we call dear colleague letters, where they push from the federal level to those entities local that receive federal funding to change their processes. On Saturday, we're kicking off our actual launch. We're kicking it off not on Union Square, if I have that correct. In DC, we're having a whole event where we're bringing in individuals led by directly impacted are speaking, but we are launching officially our JCC in Washington, DC with directly impacted people. But that night, we're all gonna come together and we're having our first ever JustUS sneaker ball. It will be Saturday, April 29th in the evening at the Hyatt Regency, Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill. We want you to dress your finest, bring your sneakers, and join us. Directly impacted people coming together in celebration of collaboration, coordination, and clear transparency on what our needs are collectively together. I am going to close from here. Again, I want you to remember that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, and we're hoping that you'll come join the table with us. Thank you.
Thanks again, everybody, for joining us and for being here. We will follow up with all of you. Again, if you have any questions, we'll keep the webinar on. If you want to post questions in the Q&A, go ahead and post your questions in there. We'll be compiling an FAQ that will be posted on the JustUS Coordinating Council website. We'll be emailing back out to you more information, especially about these launch events happening in April. Hoping that many of you can join us in DC to be part of this launch, this very historic launch. So thanks again for coming on this afternoon, being a part of this announcement, and share those questions in the Q&A, and we will follow up.